This is the Kick75, a 75% mechanical keyboard from NuPhy that represents a substantial shift towards customization. Not just because you can finally open the case, something that NuPhy has limited for years with their high-profile Halo and low-profile Air keyboards, but because the Kick is designed to convert between high and low profiles. Something made possible by the company's new low-profile nano switches, which use the same pin orientation as standard high-profile switches, allowing the PCB to support either. Though there are a few caveats that I'll get into. Before that though, you should know that this keyboard was sent to me by NuPhy, though they had no say in the video content, so I'll do my best to share my honest perspective of what I like and dislike about the Kick75. That said, let's get into it. Right off the bat, the Kick75 has what I think is an excellent price, starting at $89 USD and creeping up from there. There are 4 things that you need to consider when configuring the Kick75. The default profile that's set up on the keyboard when it arrives, either low profile, which is what I have, or high profile, which will cost you $10 more. Then you need to choose which firmware you want, either the default NuPhy IO compatible version, which comes with a 2500 mAh battery, or for $20 more, the QMK and VIA compatible option, which comes with a larger 4000 mAh battery. I was sent the QMK version with the larger battery, which got 28 hours of use in my testing under worst case full brightness backlight conditions. I do think it's a little strange that the battery capacity is tied to firmware selection, and this isn't obvious in their marketing, but if you're uncertain about which firmware to choose, I've spent a good amount of time using both, and while NuPhy IO is proprietary, it's also the best non-VIA web app that I've tried to date. So if all you're looking to do is basic key remapping or backlight customization, you should be fine with either. The one big firmware difference worth noting though is that NuPhy IO only allows macro recording, not direct syntax editing, which I personally find to be a little limiting and harder to configure. Beyond this, you also get the choice of 4 switches in either high or low profile versions, which are pretty well matched in specification, both in terms of operating force and total travel. I was sent the linear red nanos, but there are also brown tactiles, lighter silver linears, and silent blush linears. Unfortunately, I was only sent the one set, so I can't comment too much, but it's nice to see that NuPhy has a low profile silent switch to compete against the Hades low profile kill switches. Though it's worth noting that these new nano switches are only compatible with the Kick and NOS75 because of their pin layout. Finally, aside from the option of adding this plush high to low profile converting wrist rest, NuPhy is also selling profile conversion kits for an extra $19. You want to make sure that you buy the right one, but they've included everything that you need to switch to the specified low or high profile configuration, except for the switches and the keycaps. One thing to note here is that these cost the same whether you're going from high to low or low to high, so if you're planning on converting, I would recommend that you buy the keyboard as low profile to save $10 and get the kit that will let you convert to high profile. Before we get into the conversion though, let's take a quick look at the keyboard itself. The Kick75 is an 80 key plus knob 75% layout that has a slightly larger footprint than either the Halo or Air series. It also differentiates itself by having a fully polycarbonate case, whereas the others have aluminum case tops and ABS bases. That said, I actually quite like the slightly frosted clear plastic top of the Kick because it helps to showcase the south-facing RGB backlight. Backlight brightness and effects are generally a strength of NuPhy keyboards, and that's no different for the Kick75. The knob is a plastic X, which is very easy to grab and click, though I noticed that I don't have the ability to remap it from the default volume functions in VIA. Down a little further, next to the arrow cluster is a magnetic badge, as well as a side light, which in addition to adding some colorful effects to the keyboards, is used to communicate things like caps lock and Windows versus Mac modes. Aside from this, depending on whether you went with the low or high profile keyboard, you'll get the NSA or MSA NuPhy keycaps, both of which have nice crisp legends and are made of PBT, though the high-profile ones are sculpted and double-shot, while the low-profile ones are flat and die sublimated. Moving to look at the side of the keyboard, we begin to see the Nike Air Force One sneaker inspiration that gave the kick its name, with the base's horizontal column motif wrapping around the sides like a shoe tread. You'll also note the small green plastic inserts on each corner of the keyboard, which add some more color to this already quite playful aesthetic. By default, the Kick75 sits at a comfortable 6-degree tilt, but you can deploy the kickstand style feet from the base to elevate this up to 12 degrees if you want. Around the back, we find the USB-C connection port next to a slot for the radio frequency dongle on the left end, as well as an operating system toggle and power mode switch on the right end. This keyboard supports 3 Bluetooth 5.0 connections pulling at 125 Hz or 1000 Hz pulling over the wired and radio frequency connections. Transitioning between the back and the base of the kick, there's a long red silicone accent piece, which can be removed and replaced if you want to 3D print your own replacement to further customize the Kick75, because along with the green corner pieces, the knob, and the plate, NuPhy has decided to open source these components by providing access to the STP files, including this tablet stand component, which is pretty neat, though there is still some CAD fiddling needed to make things fit just right. Speaking of 3D printing, I recently upgraded my studio with an E6 sit-stand desk from this video's sponsor, FlexiSpot, which is now home to my Prusa XL 3D printer. 3 things I've enjoyed about the E6 desk are: 1. Its 3-stage legs, which set the desk height smoothly anywhere between 24.4 to 50 inches. This is critical for my printing setup because I store filament in this cabinet below the desk, which is a little higher than normal sitting height. But I also often like to raise it up to working height when finishing a project. Number 2. The powerful dual motors. These can lift 352 pounds, so they can easily handle the weight of my Prusa XL, and they're a critical component of the anti-collision system, which ensures that if I accidentally lower the desk onto something, say my filament cabinet, the desk simply bounces back up. And 3, the bamboo top. In addition to just looking awesome, I like how this is nice and thin, but rigid and easy to screw into, which has allowed me to attach custom accessories like these 3D printed acoustic panel holders. If you're in need of a sit-stand desk, check out the link in this video's description to find FlexiSpot on Amazon and pick up your own while supporting this channel. Back to the underside of the Kick75, we find 4 blue silicone feet and a simple Kick75 logo, as well as an unspokenly Mario-inspired 2D scroller game scene. But perhaps most importantly, we also find 8 Torx head screws that provide access to the inside of the case to allow us to convert the keyboard between low and high profiles. The inside of the Kick75 is also jam-packed with a polycarbonate plate foam, 2 switch pads, as well as 2 layers of base foam, one molded to the case shape just for good measure. And the PCB is supported by a gasket-mounted system. It's also worth noting here that NuPhy developed an interchangeable stabilizer mounting system that allows the stabs to be mounted to the PCB when used in low profile mode, or to the plate when used in the high profile configuration. Speaking of which, let's talk about the conversion. There's more to the process of swapping between high and low profiles than I initially expected there would be, all because the gap between the plate and the PCB changes between these configurations. This means that even though the switches have similar pin layouts and travel, we can't simply swap switches and be done with it. Instead, the conversion kit comes with a 13-page instruction manual. I'm not going to walk you through the whole process because it's pretty well documented here, but you'll have to remove your existing keycaps and switches, swap out the case top, as well as the plate foam and one of the switch pads, then move the stabilizers from the PCB to the plate, or vice versa. All in all, the conversion was actually easier than I thought it would be, but it took me about 42 minutes to make the switch. So while this is a really unique thing for NuPhy to offer with the Kick75, it isn't the kind of modification I'd want to be making regularly. I'll also note that NuPhy only includes the T6 Torx head screwdriver needed to open the case with the conversion kit, So if you want to make modifications without the kit, you'll need to buy your own. That said, let's have a listen. Starting with the default low-profile Kick75, I really like the sound and feel of this keyboard, especially compared to the Air 75 V2. I think the sound is far thockier, marbly, and less harsh, likely due to the elaborate internal layering, as well as the new all-palm red nano switches. These are definitely a step up from NuPhy's previous low-profile switches. For the high-profile configuration, I didn't receive NuPhy's new Max switches, so I used the Raspberry switches that came with my Halo 75 V2 for a more direct comparison. Here I found the Kick75's high-profile setup comparable to the Halo, which is a good thing because I really like the sound of that keyboard. Perhaps just a little less marbly. In either configuration though, I found the Kick to be quite firm and not nearly as flexible as the marketing would lead me to believe. After spending about a month with the Kick75, I think it's a pretty compelling little package for someone who's interested in delving deep into customizing the internal structure as well as some of the external open source components of their keyboard. Between the 5 layers of internal foam and pads to play around with, the 3D printable customizations, and the profile conversion kit, there are literally hours and hours that can be spent tuning this keyboard and learning about the impact of each variable. As an off-the-shelf offering, I think the Kick is a solid competitor to either the Air or the Halo series from NuPhy, and may be the best option because it can technically replace both. But what do you think? Is the Kick conversion something that you find compelling? And how do you feel about NuPhy open sourcing the accent pieces? Let me know using the comments below. Otherwise, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.